Thank you very much for having me. It's fantastic seeing the number of people that we have here. The core of technology, frankly, in terms of a lot of our agenda, is sitting right in this room. You're all helping enable a transformation that we're going through. And that is, like Stephen was talking about, how do we get from current generation architectures to future state architectures? Today I'm going to talk to you about the digital user customer journey. And the reason I'm going to talk to you about that is because, in a financial services industry, services are the number one piece that we go through. And you have to understand that customer journey. You have to understand it in a digital environment because we're all moving more and more digital, right? And it's not just from an automation perspective, but it's a consumer convenience play. It enables the consumer to use our resources and to use the services we provide much more effectively, and we actually have to understand how the consumer does that. If you go back in the history of financial services and banking, you're talking a little bit about Wild Wild West, you're talking about vaults, you're talking about commercial relationships, a very people interactive type of a space. I'm going to tell you a little story that is outside of financial services that plays into that. I'm going to go back to the 1970s because this is going to be fun for me. It's outside the digital user experience, but bear with me. In the 70s, NASA launched something called Skylab. They put it into the sky. It was a mobile laboratory in space, trying to get a sense of what kind of experimentation could be done, what kind of innovation could happen as we were going through the space race. And they found fairly early on that the sun was starting to do some really interesting things to Skylab, and it was at risk of coming down out of the sky. This was clearly not a really good idea. So in working their way through this, the engineers at NASA and JPL, they worked to actually design something that was going to go protect Skylab. It was a very, very innovative thing. It was an umbrella. They were going to launch an umbrella. They were going to attach it to Skylab. They're going to make it out of, some highly advanced materials and whatnot. They had to source that. They were working with contractors, and lo and behold, they contracted with Lockheed to help go build this umbrella for Skylab. Lockheed needed the material. They reached out to their subcontractors. Their subcontractors came out, and lo and behold, a young salesperson gets a call in the middle of the night saying, hey, we need your help, we need it now. Absolutely, right? Got in the car, went to the office, found the material. Middle of the night, nobody is in the plant right now. So, what am I going to do? Loads the material onto an 18-wheeler. Okay, that's cool. I don't know how to drive that, though. I don't have anybody here to drive it. Gets behind the wheel, drives it to Lockheed. About 15, 20 miles an hour, but the material gets there. Parks it, leaves it, done. Why is this important, right? It's a very personal experience, right? It's a salesperson working directly with their customer. They can share that story. They can talk about, the trials and tribulations they went through to get the material there. It's fantastic. I'm going to fast forward. We'll fast forward many years because I'll date myself. We'll just say 30 years. We went 30 years forward. I introduced my father, the salesperson, to my father-in-law, one of the designers at JPL. 30 years to make that connection. Didn't know each other, didn't have a sense of what that supply chain looked like, but they worked on the same thing and they delivered the same experience. How's that relevant to this? How's that relevant? Well, the reason it's relevant is because we have a number of digital experiences that end-to-end, it's very difficult to lace it together. So as you talk about something like AppDynamics, there are clearly intrinsic benefits in terms of how do you monitor systems, how do you look at your systems, how do you get insight, how do you see all the grand insights that you saw on some of the demos earlier today. But then they're the secondary and tertiary benefits, and those are frankly as important as anything else. So I don't know who this handsome man is. A little bit about me. I work over at Barclaycard. I'm responsible for technology delivery. What that means, lots of run operations and frankly lots of innovation because you want to get your operations as lean and efficient as you can. So we do a lot of innovation in that space. That's why I'm here today because this is a space that we've been innovating. Barclaycard, it's part of our retail division. We're clearly in a global payments business. We've issued some of the first cards in Europe. We did the first chip and pin in Europe. We've been at the forefront of a lot of cutting edge technologies in cards, right? Contactless has been in that space and that sort of thing. We're a market leader in the UK. We operate through Europe. We also operate North America through the US. From an industry perspective, though, right, with all of that scale comes a whole lot of difficulty, right? And this is systemic across financial services and many, many, many other industries. You have application issues that impact customers. You've got a intrinsic behavior amongst technologists to talk about Six Sigma, to talk about uptime, to talk about service availability, service compliance, risk. But then you start feeling your way into that. What does that mean? How does that come together? What does that customer experience look like while you're suffering that, right? And we've started to move the conversation from all these uptime metrics and trying to explain Six Sigma versus 5 versus what have you, into a very binary, was the customer experience delivered to the expectation that we designed that experience to be. As easy as that sounds, many, many, many industries, many, many, many companies are suffering from the ability to actually go measure that and to understand what that customer journey is. It gets more and more difficult as terms like DevOps come into play, as cloud comes into play, because you want to deliver a capability for your business user to actually make the changes they need to make and develop product in a very rapid fashion. And what that means is that you as an enterprise, when you're used to the drug of change control, the ability to audit against change control, understand all of your changes, now you've turned all of that over to the business. They can make changes on the fly, do whatever they want to, and some of that balance comes a little bit unglued. And as that starts happening, you start getting inefficiencies in terms of contact center. Your development and operations productivity start to come down as opposed to get better, because you've got all of this institutional momentum to go make the change from an industrialized space into a much, much more dynamic space. And so in order to combat that, we look to think about what are the new paths, what do we want to get done through technology, right? Working with the business to understand what are the business goals, what are the business objectives, how are we going to get those objectives met? What's the customer experience? How's that customer experience going to come into play? And how do we go measure that? Okay? It moves us from a conversation that's solely focused on what our infrastructure condition is or how it's aging, what our application condition is, how it's aging, and much more into a business enablement play. We also talk about reducing customer impacts from technology instance to zero. There's an ongoing debate as to how real that can be and if you can ever get there or if it's worth doing it, right? But the conversation also comes into play to say, how do you create an understood and resilient digital experience with all of the error handling that needs to be built into it, as well as an experience that is going to basically self-heal itself, self-monitor, see what's happening, do the predictive analytics to something going wrong, and play it back, right? Many, many, many of the issues that any company suffers are very, very predictable. You run out of memory, you run out of resource, you have an application code that fails, an outcome that was not predicted. You're always going to have those. The key for us as an industry is to understand how we don't ever have to have the customer go see that. And so those are objectives in terms of what we drive to. When you think about product, some of the business products that we've talked about and that you've seen us launch in the market are around wristbands. So the contactless wristband that we have out there, people ask all the time, is this a competitor to watch? What does that mean? How does that work? It's a very specific product that allows people a more safe and secure payment experience. When you're at a festival, you don't have to reach into your pocket. When you're in the tube, you don't have to reach for your card. You've got a bracelet that allows you to go and do those things without flashing an expensive watch or expensive device. Another area of innovation that feels like old tech is the multi-screen account displays, all the things that we try to do in terms of personalized access, and make sure that you or our business partners that you do business with have the ability to go see all the information you need to go see. It's an area that we constantly focus against because at the end of the day, again, we're a service organization. It's one of the services we provide, and we want to make sure that we are delivering those services in a way that is going to meet and exceed the customer expectations of everybody we grow with. And the third piece that you've seen us do recently is around some mobile payment technology in terms of the ability to very quickly bring online merchants, be able to do payments acceptance tools, and to get those merchants onboarded very, very quickly. From an innovation perspective, we've really had to focus on our architecture and infrastructure to move away from legacy technologies and start thinking about what are going to be the next generation capabilities. And so, we talk about self-service on cloud, we talk about microservices, and we talk about DevOps collaboration. Those are key areas for us. With cloud, it allows us to get very dynamic in terms of our ability to allocate resource and develop very quickly, particularly in our non-production environments where typically it can be very, very difficult to get resource. Thinking about microservices, this is all about developing faster, quicker, enabling application developers and enabling some of our business partners to really deliver against product suites that they want to get to, but they want to get to it in a very incremental way as opposed to a big bang view. And then DevOps collaboration, and this is all about breaking down the barriers for us between those infrastructure teams and the application development teams, as Stephen talked about earlier. So where does that come into play from AppDynamics? So AppD and the work that you all do in terms of putting that together and giving the resource around it, it really helps us have a dynamic view in terms of what services we're providing, what the digital customer experience is. It gives us an audible and traceable view in terms of that experience. So as you move into a DevOps type of a mode, it allows you to see those experiences, see the differentiated parts, know what changes you made, be certain that those changes were made in a predictable way in a very self-healing sort of environment. The self-healing part of it is really, really important because it allows us to see both the positive outcomes as well as the negative outcomes. Too many times, people get caught in a trap of testing against the intended consequence, not the unintended consequence. People don't see the unintended consequence. With something that's self-healing, with something that promotes visibility on what's happening across the board, you can see all the consequences. And we even pull some of those production behaviors back into our development and testing shops so that we can compare those experiences before you see them in the live environment, which is a very, very big deal for us. It does support a lot of what we're trying to do from an Agile and a DevOps perspective, particularly as we start talking about rapid access that's required to our cloud environments, our distributed environments. We can see that, we can allocate it, we can actually watch the behaviors and the utilization that's working against it, and we can understand where we are from an availability of those estates. A big part of our development productivity is wrapped into infrastructure. If developers don't have the infrastructure and the connectivity to the data that they need, I end up having a lot of developers that are sitting idle waiting for that. So by being able to go and monitor against that in a very efficient way, that allows us to drive up that productivity, allows us to drive up that availability. We actually don't have to wait for developer complaints and those sorts of elements. We can actually manage that in a very real-time sort of way. And in many cases, we've moved to a space where those developers are actually self-serving in that space. So they can actually understand what's broken, have visibility to what they're seeing, and be able to correct for it on the fly. From a value proposition perspective, how do we see that? How does it play in? We are seeing tremendous reductions in customer impact. We're seeing issues faster. We're seeing issues come through with more clarity. And we're actually able to respond to those issues in a very, very dynamic way. Whereas previously, many of the conditions that we monitored against were essentially self-programmed, built our own, or worked with other partners where you had to program everything in. We've actually been able to tear apart some of the issues that we've seen in the past that have been sort of legacy carriages, things that we've worked on for many, many, many months. We turn the tool on, it's like, oh, that's what's broken. So it's helped us tremendously. Now, I will tell you that there is a set of unintended consequences when you turn the spotlight on anything, right? And so as you start bringing these tools up, one of the things that we found, as you look at it, it's like, wow, I didn't know I had that many problems. And so, many times, you'll find areas that there are problems or not problems, but it has created a state where we have more resilient environments and we're able to get the benefits from that. We've got much more efficient contact centers. The data that we're providing to our contact centers is much cleaner. And so we've seen tremendous efficiencies in that space. We've got the standard both run the bank and development cost productivity have come into play in terms of our ability to manage our estates more effectively. That makes much more productive resource, much more productive staff. We're actually able to get more throughput out of that shop. As well as we've got a reduced maintenance of existing tools. Based on those productivity gains, we actually have fewer people working to fix things because they're spending less time fixing them. So from a closing perspective, and I'm moving a little bit quickly so I can get you to lunch. So, what we've seen, what we've found in terms of being able to manage a digital customer experience has been tremendous to us. It is incredibly important in terms of how we deliver service to our customers. It has changed the conversation within our industry from a Six Sigma point of view into a customer experience point of view. And it's frankly changing a language in an organization that used to be very focused on product and very specific product orientation, and moving to what's the customer dynamic, what's the customer experience on an individual by individual basis. And when you're operating in an organization that has thousands upon thousands upon thousands of customer interactions per hour, if you think about every customer swiping a card, every customer trying to make a payment, every customer trying to make a Christmas purchase, everybody trying to beat the Black Friday sales, it's incredibly important to us to have the visibility to those individuals and to be able to deliver a successful experience to every one of them. And so I encourage you all, whether you're a developer, whether you're building out the tools for AppDynamics, whether you're working in our industry or another, think about that customer experience. Think about Sam or Susan or Tammy, who's at the other end of that. Think about the person that you're asking to go drive a truck in the middle of the night. Think about what you're designing and the impact of that is to others. And think about how you're going to go watch that and how you can dynamically manage that in such a way where it's very individualized and not just a rote sort of product that you deliver off the course of doing business. So thank you very much.